Hello again and welcome back to Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. I'm Brian Easton, author of the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series, and this is where we take the time to talk about werewolves, the book series, a little bit about whiskey, a little bit about monster hunting. So tonight, our creature of the night comes to us in the form of moonshine, in a mason jar, no less. This is Old Smoky Charred Moonshine from Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Now, I think I've said in other episodes the distinction between any other kind of whiskey and moonshine is basically the mystique. Moonshine itself kind of refers to this homemade, untaxed liquor, which of course is illegal, and especially back during Prohibition, when my great-grandfather was a bootlegger, and I think I've mentioned that before too. He was in cahoots with the local sheriff back then, and when Treasury men came around, the sheriff would give my granddad a heads up, and he'd hide his stills and his product out in the woods. Now, most of the time, moonshine is also clear because, as a rule, it's not aged. This one actually has been aged a little bit. It's because it's got this, it's got the char look to it. Otherwise, this would be white. So as you can see, this moonshine has spent a little time in the charred casks, one kind or another. Now, as you might imagine, pouring a drink from a mason jar requires a little bit of finesse, and I always spill it somehow. But fortunately, they do make these little things here that help out with that. See, it's just another lid like this one. You take this one off, you screw this one on, and it has the little dispenser spout at the top. Easy pouring. I would demonstrate it for you, but you get the idea. And anyway, I think I'll have a nip of this the same way Great-Grandpa Dave would have. That's 105 proof. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it to start, but that heat kicks in about mid-palate, and then the flavor, I don't know, the flavor kind of falls apart a little bit. It's not bad. It's probably better over ice or with a little bit of water added to it, but it's not bad. It's a little pricey for what you get, but I'm not going to badmouth it. Just a quick update for you. On the next installment of the Winter Fox Journals. It's still pretty early in the going, but I'm making more headway now these last few weeks than I have since this pandemic got started. I'm starting to discover a few new things about Michael that I didn't know before, and if that sounds weird, since I'm the guy who created the character, be assured that the creative process can take on a mind of its own. And when a writer thinks he's got it all figured out, something comes along to surprise you. You never know what's going to happen in the next chapter sometimes when you write the way I do, and you kind of wait for your storyline to evolve a little on its own before you just sit down and write it down as you thought of it. So I do give myself ample room to do that, which is part of the reason why I write as slowly as I do. So for those of you who have asked me about the next book in the Winter Fox series, don't worry, I'm on the job, and I think you'll be pleased with it when it's finally done. Glad to have with us again Derek Tex Grebner from Tex Grebner Outdoors. Now, Tex, in addition to being a reader of the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series from way back, is also an accomplished hunter, archer, fisherman, and one side of his brain is hip deep in legends and lore, and the other side is steeped with this impressive knowledge of firearms and other weaponry. So here he is to discuss some of his thoughts and original headcanon on the book series, Tex Grebner.
Well, I'm slightly more inebriated than the last time I was on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. But I'm making this video because I'm moved by the spirits, so to speak. still drinking my Catholic whiskey, and I learned that I was getting mean as a coon dog with an empty water pan when I could sip whiskey with a cheek full of Copenhagen without flinching. So anyways, what did I want to talk to you about? Well, I've been going through all 4 books with a fine-tooth comb of late because I'm trying to get ready to do a YouTube review on my channel. And so the Wendigo hates the lineage. And I think I know why. And it goes back to the appendix of the Winter Fox Journal, Book 1. Assuming that we're dealing with a monomyth theory. Maheo is the All-Spirit. And it doesn't matter whether it's Maheo or Yahweh. We're talking about a God. And so it doesn't matter whether it is Wendigo or whatever the Wendigo's name is, being a translation of hatred. In the spirit world, it's an abstraction no matter what. So anyways, the Wendigo hates the lineage because Alaric ate human flesh at Esau's campfire. And the Therion, Esau, stole the Wendigo's prodigy, as well as the fact that Lucane possibly, this is apocryphal, but possibly brought Esau, the Therion, into the world because he was part of a cannibal blood cult. So not only did Esau rob the Wendigo of an acolyte, being Alaric the Elder, who ate human flesh, consumed of the long pig at Esau's campfire in the forest, but the Therion also robbed the Wendigo of a priest, because Lucane was part of a cannibal cult to begin with before he became a beast prince. And so it stands to reason in my mind that that is why the Wendigo has such a hatred for the werewolf and for the lineage at large. Now, in the interest of a random non sequitur, there's a catch-22 to trying to take down the lineage. And that is that the soul of the beast is communal. If we killed all the werewolves, Esau would be restored to full strength and would be the dread beast Fenrir and would be ridden by the harlot to usher in the apocalypse. The problem is, if the lineage is not culled, we still end up with a werewolf apocalypse because they would overpopulate and enslave the earth. So it really is a catch-22. And the beast, the Shumanichuacha, is a necessary evil, unfortunately, within the universe. Because if we killed them all, we trigger the apocalypse. Because Esau gets his whole soul back. But if we don't keep them hunted, they enslave the earth. It really, truly is, as Sylvester says, an unwinnable war. Now, another random non sequitur. This here is a tiger slug, or more accurately, it is a 10-bore, as in 10 equally sized round balls out of a pound of lead, even though this is a conical slug. This is a 10-bore slug that would have been used for hunting tigers prior to the invention of the Nitro Express calibers in 1898. The reason that I bring this up is because assuming that I had to take on a Darkest Woven, this would be practically a good choice, especially seeing as we know that after World War I, Winter Fox ends up in India. Now, this isn't necessarily as powerful as, say, a 577 Nitro Express or a 600 Nitro Express, and it was rendered obsolete by the invention of the 577 Nitro Express. However, the 10-bore paradox loading, being black powder, was very popular for dangerous game hunting in its day. And this is a massive chunk of lead here. Granted, to quote Sly, is just plain old lead. However, if this were silver, and a double rifle is not a long-range weapon, and assuming that it's a paradox gun, it would be basically smooth bore with just a little bit of twist at the end. It's not like it's a super accurate weapon to begin with. So yes, if I had to choose a weapon to fire into the face of a Darkest Woven, darned if it wouldn't be a 10-bore paradox loading, because, man, this worked. And I mean, even now, this works. Funny story, I've got a friend that actually loads these things. This is just a replica. As you can see, it doesn't have a primer in it. But just for the hell of it, I may ask Jason from Aria Ballistic Engineering to make up some actual silver Devastator Tiger Slugs in 10-bore for Mr. Brian Easton's 10-gauge side-by-side sounder replica. Even though, God, this out of a Howdah, God, that would be so miserable to try and fire. But I may at least, even though I couldn't afford the silver, see if it would be something that Brian could actually get, would be some Darkest Woven Slayers, seeing as I'm sort of a resident werewolf weaponry expert. In the interest of a closing non sequitur, because the whiskey is racing my mind into ruin, I came across in my research a werewolf bishop. That's right, a werewolf bishop. Now, apparently, back at the time of the Crusades, the church needed money, which was a very important point in this whole deal. But in the Nordic Empire of Northern Europe, there was a warlord who converted to Christianity, not because of its Savior Jesus Christ, but also much like Peter Stubb in the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter mythos, for its negative aspect of Lucifer. And so this Viking warlord converts to Christianity because you can't blaspheme something unless you believe in it. Not only does he convert, but he then uses his profits from pillaging monasteries in Ireland, Scotland, and England, and Wales to actually buy himself into becoming a bishop of his own monastery and cathedral in Northern Europe while the Crusades are going on. So we now have a Luciferian bishop, werewolf, And nobody knows, outside the monastery's cloistered vows, what the hell's going on, because at the time the masses were given in Latin. God help those poor people. They literally had a werewolf Luciferian bishop that was basically all-powerful, politically speaking, that was in charge of his diocese. And I do think that the werewolf bishop, being a Viking that converts to Christianity for its negative aspects and becomes a Luciferian prophet, actually would be a fitting backstory to the Black Cross, so to speak, from the autobiography of a werewolf hunter mythos. Pause. It's okay to record drunk, always edit sober. So I wanted to actually clarify this now that I'm editing this film. Yes, the Black Cross is a subsect of the Jabberwocky Lavoisin Syndicate. However, what I was getting at was it could have been the origin of the Black Cross, but the Black Cross was later absorbed into Lavoisin and the Jabberwocky Syndicate. Now, this may be a plot point that's already been exploited because the diabolical werewolf bishop from the Nordic Empire does bear remarkable similarities to Peter Stubb converting to Christianity for its negative aspect as well. So for all I know, it's already been exploited. But it stands to reason that it is a good origin for the Black Cross before it was absorbed into the Lavoisin Jabberwocky Syndicate of Peter Stubb and the Gandions. The Church of Rome, that is, because I'm a filthy papist, not a particularly good one, but definitely a filthy papist. Apparently the Church of Rome in 1520 figured out what the hell was going on way up north, because as you might have noticed, communication wasn't what it is today way back then. And so after this Luciferian bishop and possible werewolf has lived a Solomon-long life, the Vatican sends mercenaries up to deal with him. Long story short, I think that would be an excellent opening to where the Black Cross came from. Because you can't blaspheme something unless you believe in it. You can't have a counterculture, at least in my understanding. You can't have a counterculture. You can't do wrong unless you actually know what right is first. And speaking of which, you don't have to be flesh and blood to take an ass whipping or to dish one out. Oh boy, people are still, myself included, working on the Jericho mystery. But, mind the moon. And seeing as we're on the cusp of the apocalypse, I'm growing my trophy scalp still. That way when they cut my head off, you'll know it's me.
Thanks, Tex. Your insights and ideas always give me something to think about. I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate you for taking the time to spend with us this evening. Remember to hit that subscribe button before you go if you haven't already, and you can visit us on the web at werewolfhunter.com. And I hope you'll join us again next time. And until then, happy hunting and mind the moon.